Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. You are watching live War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Hello Alexey. Hello. So let's start with a question. I am really curious to ask it after problems that we brought up about our ability to negotiate in the previous streams. I want to use the term super fork. And after the elections in the United States, I think Trump is also in that super fork position that pushes him to act faster. Or perhaps I'm wrong here, but it also puts other participants of the process in a situation when prolong is always worse than to make a decision now. But making a decision now is so uncomfortable that that creates another pole of tension. Do you think it's correct? Wait a second, Nikolai. Do you think the fork is whether to act or not to act? What is the left tooth? What is the right tooth of that fork? Well, it appears that when Trump said that he will finish this war and all wars before his inauguration, that puts certain obligations on him to act and be rather proactive. You think? Right, act as whom? As a force, I guess, Alexei. As a big force. Well, he will really become a force when he takes position on the 20th of January. Until then, I think most players will be trying to slow walk it, sing long Scottish songs, and Russians and Iranians and North Koreans and in the United States and in Europe, everywhere. It's a different stage now. I think current stage can be qualified as scaring or frightening. Everybody, Europe needs to freak out that they will be left alone facing Russia. China may be afraid because they're facing the trade war proposition. Washington bureaucrats need to be shivering because he promised to move them all from DC over to somewhere in Colorado. And Zelensky needs to be afraid because Trump might change the way America participates in support of Ukraine. So everybody is horrified, or supposed to be horrified in this stage. Now, after he gains power, official power on the 20th, it'll be a different phase. It'll be the phase of realpolitik. In realpolitik, you cannot just take somebody and erase him from the board. And a good example would be those grant eaters in Ukraine who've been devouring American grants and European grants for a while. They are now scared that their sources of funding will evaporate. They will still be getting them, however. They will not be getting perhaps federal money, American official money, but they'll be getting money from private funds. Unfortunately, Trump cannot change real physical world. He cannot change geography or cannot change other factors that are important for realpolitik. And yeah, I would love to have some super Trump who would really change the geography of this world and many other things. But I'm skeptical here. And I want to probably calm down some of those who are afraid that Trump will be dealing with realpolitik. Yes, there'll be changes. Yes, there'll be some change of flow in the United States as well. But for 90% on the international arena, it will likely meet the same vectors, except for being done under different style. And we can all cheer this change of style, because the previous was horribly boring. And however, I don't think there'll be too drastic of a change for the world. Trump will be continuing to defend the national interests of the United States the way he understands them, and he's understanding them very closely to the same picture as the other presidents of the US, because a lot of input into this understanding is geography, capabilities of the United States and its adversaries. They have analytic centers that are developing strategic options. He's not taking it from somewhere, right? He looks at the documents, he looks at the analytics, he looks at the data, and is making decisions. So I don't think the world has changed that much, so he would be changing decisions so differently. He can make decisions rapidly, he can make interesting decisions, but we'll see whether he will do that in regards to the current problems. Because it may happen that you will not be able to wrap up the current war quickly, or maybe some new wars, new conflicts will crop up. because desire of one person, even if it is a Trump, to end it doesn't mean that the problem will disappear. So the forecast probably correct what you asked here. Whether Trump will change the flow of history, I want to say in large, probably not. But at least he'll be trying to administer the United States in a different fashion, and he may be attempting to change it, to change that flow. And Democrats, while they're in power, everything is boring. Tolerance, inclusiveness, all that dancing around different groups of people. And Trump is not like that. So at least we will have some entertainment. That's why it's very peculiar for me to observe Ukrainian opposition, which now are in the most upset poses they can strike, and have even figured out a new other ways to beg for grant money. And they're almost adding Tchaikovsky music to their figures, and they're slowly walking in the stage, as if on some ballet show. And now they're grieving that Trump has come. It's the end of democracy for them, and everything is lost. Right? No abortions. We'll lose the war. Ukraine will be given to Putin. Earth will change its rotation. Meat will become too expensive. Jews will maybe win the war. So all these horrible things for the Dems. Perhaps Trump will not acknowledge Palestine. It will never become a separate state and under him. So yeah, all these horrible things that the lefts are afraid of. Okay, here's another starter for you for more commentary. Trump is aiming to break some budding ties between Iran, Korea, Russia, and China. That publication was released by The Hill. I think it's a conservative publication in the United States. In Ukraine, this article is presented in this fashion, while the original article had a note there, and for that, he needs Ukraine. So without this add-on, Trump looks like a fighter with the axis of evil. With this addition as an original article, he looks more like a rational figure who is expected to make some rational decisions regarding exchanging the interests of Ukraine for interests of Russia in regards to China, to separate Russia from China. Is that the way I'm reading it? Is it how you see it in the US? Well, listen, Nikolai, the West and the evil Trump are preserving Ukraine more and caring of Ukraine more than we probably deserve. In Ukraine, we think that everything is not given enough to us. They're not giving us enough support, enough money, enough everything. In reality, I think we are missing to understand that some other Trump or some other figure at the helm of US could probably just give Ukraine to Russia in exchange for China, a Russian position against China. And meantime, United States is defending our interests, even our positions beyond the left bank and current positions we're holding along the war front. They're actually pushing on Russia to not advance, to not take more. I'm really curious. I wonder why they're doing it. They're probably very sentimental people because they continue to push that Ukraine needs energy systems, needs exit to the ocean, needs different resources. Yeah, as I'm smiling here, very sentimental, right? So he will probably be playing this card to separate Russia and China because it is US interests, to prevent, however you call it, Mongol Empire 2 or global continent or something, what Russia and China and the global south are going for. So they will be trying to split that global south apart, contrapositioning the interests of China to interests of India, to interests of the Turan cropping out. And I think at best the wars may stop, the ones where United States are participating. I think he'll be able to stop those wars. But I don't think Trump has enough power to stop all wars in the world, because where America is not present, how do you do it? And of course, this is one of his key tasks, to split the global south. But however it works for him, we'll see. The way I see it is, when he takes power, he will try to rapidly, even before his ascension to full power, he'll try to figure out how to solve certain domestic things to concentrate on the external policies. But I think he will fail to do everything fast at home, because there'll be some resistance. Then he'll try to do externals to do internals as well, and it'll take time as well. It will not be something quick for him to dismantle the swamp, to move them somewhere. And after that, when he fails to achieve rapid successes on both external and internal matters, we'll see the real Trump. How his administration will be able to understand the real core of the problem and how will they be able to solve it. We don't know yet. I hope it will be professional and strong. But as in one movie, the main character was saying, these matters take some time and attention. So that's where I'm thinking. When he will meet real resistance, real pushback, that's when we'll see how capable this administration is. The first thing that little specters learn in their spectre school when they're told that you work in the central apparatus of the country and you always are tempted to go to the periphery of your country and to change stuff, as people from the center. And the second aspect is a similar thing, especially when you go to a periphery or a smaller country of a third world, where you think you can go there and change things rapidly. This is a mistake that went to decline of many talented people. It's very difficult to compete with locals, both for big empires when they try to act from their main center on the periphery, or from, externally when they go to other countries. I'm not even going to bring here like Afghanistan and Vietnam, right? So Trump is posting right tasks for the states, for the world, but they're critical and they're not so easy to solve. And it's absolutely not obvious that all these tasks that the article in The Hill outlines will be solvable in a rapid fashion. And that's when I think we'll be surprised the second time that we're not being abandoned again. Because when there'll be more resistance and the quick solution will not work, they'll be very tempted to probably dump Ukraine and don't care, but they'll probably still keep us. And now let's turn around this picture for 180 degrees and ask a central question. What are we in this situation? Are we as Ukraine going to continue to steal, beg, and be very chauvinistic the way we are? Why should we not be dumped? What are we to be preserved and saved? Alexey, the answer coming from the quote of President Zelensky, I think, in this matter, that he said in this summit in Budapest, right after Trump's victory, answering the question, what will you do if Trump will not be supporting you financially? Where will you take arms? How will you be defending the country? He's saying, I'm answering this question, can we take 300 billion that were already allocated for us? That's an interesting answer, right? Okay, Nikolai, imagine we're given 900 billion. So we're sitting on 900 billion. We piled a big pile of money in cash and we're sitting on it in Ukraine. The question would be, what do we do with it? You need to buy arms for this money. Sale of arms is a political decision. However many billions you're going to be bringing for one bullet, if there'll be no political decision to sell it to you, you will not buy it. Then there is another option. You can maybe fortify Kurakhovo Dam with this money, or give our soldiers this money so they'd be shooting dollars at the enemy, hoping that, as in that fairy tale about Hadjan Nasreddin, where the guards would be running, chasing coin, and not attacking our positions. What else you can do? You can probably dump them from the plane over Kursk district, right? And calling from the microphone, from the loudspeakers, for Russians to repent. Of course, they will repent and will cease their hostilities, right? Any other strategic investments, building, or transfer of technology, this is not money, first of all. This is a political decision, first of all. Even if you get $90 trillion, what will it change? We'll build a tower to the moon and we'll move to the moon and live there? These dollars do not mean anything without political support. We may not get any money, but we may get the decision about land lease actually working, which was signed for Biden, but he never used it. And there were no dollars implied in this document. They were implying that America will give more arms to Ukraine, but unfortunately or fortunately, they never did it. Well, that position is not exactly realistic, right? However, it is called upon. Let me quote another advisor who was being shunned by the politicians in the US and our Ukraine's Democrats, Soros eating grantees. they're now attacking that, hey, he misspoke, he shouldn't be talking about forfeiting Crimea to Russia. These guys are either pretending not to understand or really don't understand, because it's always somebody in the past, somebody X, who is making a first statement, and everybody in the official power are refuting it, but eventually it gets on the radar and becomes a reality. So when you're hearing that, and there was an interesting word used, he said that suggestion of Ukraine to go to the borders of 91 and to take Crimea back, they look not serious. And I wrote a post about that specifically. For the first time in the West, it is used, it is worded differently. Previously, it was called unrealistic, but when it is being called not serious, this is already getting personal to the Ukrainian politicians. And sooner it'll be sounding more and more and more till it ends up in a big crash for us. Let me correct you here, Alexey. This was the advisor of Trump, right? Not Biden. Right, this was Trump. You're correct. So, ex-advisor. And, okay, let's look at the position of Fico, among others, who said that Zelensky is scared. He said that Zelensky was shocked that Trump has won on the elections in the US. Fico is saying that he concluded that looking at the president of Ukraine during that Congress in Budapest. And he was stating that Zelensky is shocked that Trump has won. And he's afraid that aid from the United States may cease to come. Well, Nikolai, Ukrainians see the whole galleries of people like that. Portnikov, Sternenko, Pritula. We can spend the next couple hours just naming these talking heads in Ukraine. They're all afraid that the war may be over because all the political capital they have is because of war. And that was my promise to them, that I can turn this trauma of war on them so they really get acquainted with it when this thing comes to an end. Let's help our audience understand an important thing. This will be a real fork here. There are some people who believe that if you concentrate super effort and certain decision may turn our defeat into a victory, or at least into a situation without a clear winner. And I want to say that, yes, these options exist, but people are missing the nature of the crisis. What is a crisis? Crisis is not when there are no decisions and resources. Crisis is when people who know what to do and who know how to use these resources and where to take them cannot get these resources and get this power, for example, administrative power in the country. This is the tragedy of crisis, that the burning bus is driving and falling into abyss, and there is a competent driver who can turn around and prevent it from actually going off the cliff, but he's not being led to the helm on any level, neither from the platoon leader to the level of top supreme commander-in-chief. And this is the crisis. Ukraine, even now, just by itself, has enough resources to lead the situation to a stalemate. But I don't think this was going to happen because crisis needs to unfold to play out to the end. What people do not understand, I've said that a couple times before, I'll say it again, this all will end in a horrible catastrophe. And this catastrophe needed to God, to the destiny, to the future of Ukraine, however you call it. And this is not a catastrophe of Ukraine. This is a catastrophe of the Second Republic in Ukraine, or the current system as it is now. Because it has to teach our people to get rid of several ideas forever. Narrow, nationalistic and chauvinistic project, which is based completely on elevating some groups of people over the others and pressing other groups down. Second is inefficiency of bureaucracy built on the post-Soviet style. Not even Soviet, but post-Soviet, as a managing organism, as a managing system. This one can only be corrupt and self-sustain. And the third idea is a neo-imperial idea, because all our anti-imperialists in Ukraine, they're blaming Russia, but they're peddling the actual imperial ideas. Let's split Russia in chunks, let's create individual governments on the different territories of Russia, of what used to be. This is how the First World War started. This is how empires were exchanging verbal blows at the beginning. Because all this screams about separating Vladivostok or cutting Russia till Urals, this is nonsense. Also, all these three things need to suffer such a catastrophic defeat that nobody, I repeat, nobody, except for maybe some cold Toronto, wherever the Canadian diaspora is sitting, that is historically based on Bandera's support and his theoreticians, they would never again come back to these ideas. So they would never think that maybe these ideas were correct and maybe we just did not try enough, didn't play hard enough. So that nobody would have any shadow of doubt that these ideas are completely pointless. They're not leading us anywhere and they're giving us only defeat. Our people still fail to understand simple things, that they'll be bombed, parts of their territory will be taken away until they actually learn this lesson. That the narrow nationalistic project, corruption and inefficiency, they're all intimately tied with one idea. They're all tied with a basic axiomatic idea, because at the baseline of this, that narrow chauvinistic project, ineffective bureaucracy or neo-imperial view, there is the same idea that some class of people, by the fact of the birth or social choice, can have privileges over the other class of people. If you speak Ukrainian, you're good, here are some privileges. If you're fighting on the front, here are some privileges for you. You are rising above others. Privileges are good by themselves, but the nuance is that you do not write down the rest of people into the second sort people, second sort or lower sorted citizens, lower grade citizens. So this, we're using this as a social weapon. These ideas need to be squashed. When you're talking with Europeans or Americans about that, about these practices we're going through in Ukraine, they're telling you, guys, we went through that in Europe and we finished it in 1945. Why are you repeating this in 2025, 80 years later? If you want to see how it can be, go to the museums. In Europe, you have a ton of museums with this. Why are you repeating the same practices? We went through this, we learned these historic lessons, and we're not doing it anymore. We have other challenges, other lessons related to migrants, with some left thing, but we definitely have dealt with this part of European history. You have not studied European history of the Second World War and leading to it? Timothy Snyder did not print something in his book clear enough. Let's take you by the hand again and show you. Because these ideas of class, racial, national, and other superiority of one groups of people over the others. That same American democracy that everybody is appealing to and begging money from, it is built entirely on refutation of these ideas. You're coming to Americans, regardless whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who have constitution refuting these ideas. You're bringing the sack full of these ideas, basically highlighting that everybody who speaks Russian are not people, not humans, Russia should not exist, and there are first-grade Ukrainians and second-grade Ukrainians, and give us money to fund that. Americans who actually started their existence as a nation, rebelling against Britain with a similar set of ideas they were fighting against, they're looking at each other, and the whole history they've been fighting against, and they're looking at each other asking a question, why the heck should we fund them? Let's just give them to Russia. Why should we deal with that country? Because they're suggesting us to fund everything that we've been fighting with for over 200 years, for which the whole United States idea was created. And then the only thing when Ukraine brings that, okay, let's do that until otherwise Putin will prevail, that's the only thing that kind of works with the United States, that say, okay, well, maybe let's do it to prevent Putin from winning. So when they're asking why Americans do not want our victory, what victory do they want? Should they want? The victory of ideas of chauvinism prevailing over other ideas? That some class of people is better than the others? That some people are of a different class and should have different privileges than the others? America was born on fighting these ideas. And now here you come with your wet hands clapping and asking for money to fund these atrocities over in Ukraine. So from here, from across the pond, we see it as literally a madhouse. Room number 6 in a madhouse that comes there and says, begs for money, please fund our totalitarianism, fund our leftism, and fund our nationalism. and fund our fight for the official language, for the Ukrainian language, to be the only language in the country. And they're asking it from a country where you can speak any language. A congressman can speak Swahili in Congress. Nobody will tell him not to. They'll just turn on the translator. It's a free country. You can speak any language you want. There was recently a holiday of some diversity in Washington, and they were proud that they're using 167 tongues in the District of Columbia for different reasons. And I can only imagine laughing here if I go here somewhere to buy some coffee and somebody looks at me and says, I'm speaking the wrong language. I don't know about the whole network, if that's a part of a bigger coffee shop, but that shop specifically will probably be done with if that happens. And in Ukraine, we're proud to say that in this coffee shop, we're not serving anything in Russian. I mean, you can be proud of that, but don't then come begging for money from Americans or Europeans. Europeans are the ones who were playing these games. America was just fixing and observing. But they played enough, and they also figured that it doesn't work. And not because Europeans don't want to be imperialists. They learned it on practice that it doesn't work. It was a very long, bloody lesson since the end of 19th to roughly 1945, to the end of Second World War. They learned this lesson, and ours didn't, even though Ukraine participated in a bunch of these wars. But as a philosopher was saying, a dumb person never plays. He's always trying to win back something that he lost. And yeah, it looks like we're coming to Ukraine, to America, and asking, give us money, give us also capital, give us the Statue of Liberty and the Norfolk base. And when we're being asked why, our position is, well, for the idea, for free Ukraine, for free Far East, and to be able to exterminate Russian language in Kiev. Right? That's how they hear it here. And I'm not even talking about persecution of church. This is a whole other segment, because 93% of people who believe in God and have some affiliation with religion, they look at that with very big question in their eyes in the US. And then people in Ukraine make very surprised face and say, why Johnson doesn't want to fund Ukraine? We're so fantastic. We just want to say that half of our population are second grade, and maybe 150 million in the other country are also not humans. Well, they're aggressor, but... And let's remove Russian language, by the way. That's one of the official international languages of the United Nations. And also let's prohibit the church, because what it is, it's only 6.5 million people, including soldiers fighting for Ukraine, who are of that religion. And why do you not want to fund it? Americans, you're very evil. You may be loving Putin too much? How come? Do you not understand that American taxpayer needs to take $20 each and give money to Ukraine, so Bulgakov will never be read in Ukraine? 200 is better, or 300 billion is even better. You can't imagine how of a madhouse it appears to be from here. It's not even room number 6 in a madhouse. It's a corner of the room number 6, or one bed in room number 6 of that house. So it's very surprising. And they're still believing, these guys in Ukraine, that they should be given money for all that. And they're failing to understand why they're not getting support. God damn it, why Americans are not funding us? Because it's their holy duty to give their money and their last cow to help Ukrainian Institute of National Ideas to flourish. And if they don't, they probably have sold their souls to Putin, and they don't understand Ukrainian fight and struggle. Only they present their Komsomol-like speech-based historic schizophrenic ideas to be Ukraine and Ukraine history, and have here to explain to United States that no, Ukraine is not that. There is a big difference between that flow and the real country. And Americans are clear. They're saying, yes, we can support certain things, we can support your values. And they're asking me, how many people like you are in the Ukraine? And I'm saying, well, there is me for sure, but I'm not in Ukraine right now, because if I was there, I'd be suppressed like others who were taking this position. So Zelensky does speak about freedoms and rights in his speech, though, Alexey. Let me read here. Who are we to decide where people should live, which flag should they appreciate, which language should they speak. We're just managers. And when some group decided to capture the people who live in our country, me as the guarantor of constitution need to make sure that this person is defended, protected, returned back from captivity, and I have arms and armed people to use to defend our constitution. And unfortunately, that person, Putin, implying here, does not want any dialogue and does not want to stop the war. Damned Americans and damned Europe, right? Following the statement of Zelensky, Nikolai. Americans like the words, but they always look at the deeds. And if you ask a question, what language should we be speaking? We have a government bureaucrat in Ukraine, Taras Kremen, or does president have his initiatives? Because language laws that were adopted in Ukraine, they go against the constitution of Ukraine. And we do have, as he says, the guarantor of constitution. He's being given a separate complaint about it. I think in the recent appeal, everybody were complaining, both Ukrainian speaking and Russian speaking, that there is no parity with the languages. And so where's guarantor in this matter? I'm looking everywhere, even under the car seat here. Anybody seen that guarantor who cannot deal with the law that his Rada is taking, that his Congress is adopting, that people are complaining about? Because I know how to speak beautiful words. What do you do in practice? We have lost this guarantor of constitution somewhere. Can we maybe fundraise 300 billions to find that guarantor that may be able to fulfill the constitution and laws written in it in Ukraine? What we're missing in Ukraine is that foreign policy is always a continuation of internal policy, of domestic policy. If domestic is at chaos, the same thing will be in external expression. Simple question. If you have a corruption inside, where is the guarantee that you will not steal the external aid coming to you? And if you are not going to steal it, okay, how are we going to invest it? To fund continuous systemic violations of your own constitution? Just imagine a conversation with American. You're telling them, you know, we're also for constitution. We don't want to be a village that is being swayed by emotional waves one way or the other. We want to be an adult country that has its own constitution and laws working. But at the same time, I'm making a statement just 3 days ago, 76% of laws that our Congress adopts have contradictions with existing laws and constitution. For Americans, the law that violates constitution is roughly comparing it to, like Ayatollah Khomeini would be having breakfast in pig's lard, even worse. So they're asking a question, what are we even talking about then, if there is such a legal chaos in the country? And this is the fact, 76%, it's not even my opinion, it's an opinion of one of the Congress committees, the legal committee of Ukrainian Congress, that they contradict constitution. 76%. How can this system fight? How can the system reform? How can the system win over somebody? We can talk more. We also have a president who is a guarantor of constitution, and he learns that somewhere in Zhytomyr, on some street, there are violations of constitutional rights of a citizen. How can he defend them, technically? We have a guarantor, right? No, there is no ways. Exactly, Nikolai, there are no ways. He can send maybe special services to investigate. They can conduct investigation. They can start a criminal investigation and give it to court. But the court may take a different decision, not to follow the constitution. What would the guarantor do in this case? At maximum, you can fire a judge, right, as the president. Have you heard many cases when he fired judges? Oh, no, I have not heard any. Exactly. So he doesn't have any mechanisms to defend this constitution. Our president is also responsible for external policies and defense. But whom do Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense report to? To President? No, Nikolai, to Prime Minister. So every time when he's calling them directly, or he's asking them to come and discuss foreign policies, he's actually violating the order circumventing prime minister, or he needs to be asking prime minister for this permission. But then these two ministers find themselves in a situation when they have two bosses, because in a parliamentary republic, they may belong to different political forces that are in conflict between each other if some president fails to get a supermajority in Congress. So whom do they listen to? Do you understand that the whole model of political system in Ukraine has got very big issues? It's non-effective, it's got breaking points, and it's also very poorly implemented. Even if it was problematic but would be carried out rather effectively, that would be one case. But we have doubly exacerbated that. It's poorly written and it's also poorly implemented. And when the president is asking Minister of Foreign Affairs to do something, he can mumble something and say, talk to my immediate boss, right? Because he cannot listen to you. I always like to ask a question, what's the name of the Prime Minister of the United States? Right, there is no Prime Minister in the US. Exactly, Nikolai, but there are some people who actually start thinking and trying to remember. Whom is the Secretary of State reporting to President? Because the way it is in the United States, President is responsible for foreign policies. That means that the Secretary of State is reporting to President. This is the question, addressing the question of efficacy, of being effective as a system. And when you start looking into these nuanced things, you start asking questions. So how do you even exist as a country? And that raises other questions. So what do we pay money for? For absolutely ineffective system? You know, for Americans, one argument is good enough. Church and language, that also affects it. But if you just bring them the fact that 76% of Ukrainian laws adopted by Congress contradict the Constitution, this is basically enough to draw a big fat cross on this project and say, no, these people cannot be saved. This is not some treacherous Putin adopting these laws, right? Or maybe Putin is doing that, and Putin is stealing the money here. Let's get Putin to answer, right? Putin, stop adopting these laws in violation. One thing is to incur and attack the country and start a war with it, but you're also adopting the laws for Ukraine. Let's dump everything on him. Perhaps he's the one to blame for our constitution. And if not him, then it's us, right? That's us. We are the ones adopting these laws. Maybe Putin's agents in the Congress? No, you look at the people, they're real patriots, real Ukrainian patriots in there. For example, you know how joining EU and NATO was written into Constitution, right, with the full violation of the flow of this Constitution amendment process. So we adopted that, violating our Declaration of Independence, where we write that we're a neutral state. And that is being presented as the historic act. And if we equalize violation of Constitution to the level of historic act, what would America give the money for? For them, Constitution is something holy. Kids learning by heart the preamble to it. Whom are they going to give money? People who systemically violate their Constitution? For what? This is as if church would be paying for atheists who are attacking churches, right? And you're coming to Roman Pope and saying we're against Catholicism. 76% of our decisions of our organization will attack church and Christ and everything, and you have to fund it. Right? Sounds logical. Exactly. Well done. Very impressive people. Ukrainians who think like this, they're real achievers here in this situation. And now they're connecting American unwillingness to fund it and to support it. They're screaming about horrible tweets of Elon Musk, the defeatist as they call him. And a lot of them made their careers on it. They're making money on the deaths of their compatriots at the front and setting up this bureaucratic system that violates human rights systemically in the country, where 76% violate Constitution. And now that the war threatens to off the system because it's so ineffective historically, they're talking about the crash of Ukraine and horrible defeat. Guys, this is not the crash of Ukraine. Ukraine had survived guys like you many times. Ukrainians were always there and always have been. But it will be your personal crash, and we're trying to make sure that it comes soonest and in most effective way. so that you would not be as a genre in the Ukrainian politics again in the renewed Ukraine. And there would be only memories about you in museums where we'd be taking our kids to and showing how the country should not be run and which thesis politicians should not be peddling. They are running in Ukraine with flags NATO and EU, peddling the practices and begging for money for practices that both NATO and EU have denounced a long time ago, that go against the core of values of these groups. And only poor Ukrainian citizens who can't even get that they need to use European Human Rights Court to defend their rights from the acts of the Ukrainian authorities. And these authorities in Ukraine actually are interested in people to be not aware of these mechanisms, because European court could actually affect a lot of these decisions, but our compatriots are unfortunately too scared by the current situation to go for it, and they're believing that they're fighting for freedom. But do you want that to be funded by Europe or United States? I'm saying they will not. All right, I then suggest Alexey to review a political alternative to the one who is leading the country today. Perhaps look at the one who led the country yesterday, last presidential term, Poroshenko, in his interview to CNN, answering the question that Trump promised to close this war in 24 hours. Poroshenko, if he believes that, is answering that it is nice for him to hear that Trump is eager to finish this war, but he thinks the best way to do it is to invite Ukraine to become part of NATO. If Ukraine becomes part of NATO, the war will stop in 24 hours. There will be no peace if Ukraine won't, neither in 24 hours nor in 24 years. Oh, the wise one, Petro Poroshenko. Let me tell you one story, Nikolai. I was actually saving it for debates with Petro Poroshenko, but I may repeat that if I am ever to debate him. One acquaintance of mine has a restaurant in Kiev. About 2 months before Poroshenko election, he calls me and says, before Poroshenko re-election for the second term. So he was telling me that Poroshenko booked a restaurant. Of course, the restaurant is closed. He comes with his family. They eat for about $1,500 worth of dinner without paying and without leaving any tip for the waiters, who were deprived of their usual earnings this evening. That's one part of a thing. And then a couple days later, they get another legal case started by Poroshenko for about $50,000 that this restaurant has a Kiev cake in the menu, which is an exclusive product of Poroshenko Roshen sweets confectionery. And they start a legal battle now, basically fighting against that case and explaining the restaurant is fighting that this name of the restaurant exists since the Soviet times, so Poroshenko claims to the rights of this name are worthless. And they were also given, Poroshenko's group, by the way, says, okay, finally they settle it out of court. They cease and desist on pushing it, but then they pick a different one. So they send another $5,000 worth of lawsuit at them for the cake that was given to them. When you ask the box, whatever is left, it was boxed in a white box with a very thin red string. And that visual, the white box with the red string, is the visual supposedly owned by Roshen company, and they pressured restaurant to pay for that violation. So after that, all these wise words that Poroshenko was giving to Trump, you can wrap all that transcript from this, him answering questions on this show, and show it up his where, because this is everything you need to know about Poroshenko. And I will bring up this story again when we are to debate. After this, let him advise President of the United States how, circumventing Constitution, do you change the main legal document of the country. Maybe he can share that know-how because he has that experience to address his electoral preferences and continue blowing his own trumpet, trying to get majority in parliament. That's where he's a real expert. Everything else, not so much. All right. Reuters, Ukraine is fighting to form starting positions for any negotiations after Trump goes back to the office. The next several months will be decisive in this war. They'll be definitive. Even from this prognosis, read by Reuters, at least according to the picture they are displaying, nobody is going to stop in the next couple months till Trump is firmly in the office. In your view, Alexei, do you think indeed this is true? Until Trump's inauguration, we should not be expecting anything related to negotiations, ceasefire, etc. Well, no, Nikolai, things are being discussed. There may be additional meeting between Putin and Trump at some point, at least at the non-existent call between Putin and Trump that was discussed. They were preliminary clerks talking about that. Presidents usually pick the phone when the agenda is already negotiated up to 90%. So the thing here is that Putin is a legalist. In order for him to sign anything serious, president needs to become an official president of the United States. So while they may be talking about things and discussing stuff, it is obviously an important thing for Putin to capture more territory right before the peace accord, before the ceasefire. As we discussed several times before, normally on the eve of that happening, both sides usually fight more and try to capture the best positions for themselves to use in negotiating. So they probably will exacerbate their attempts to kick Ukraine out of Kursk district, which Ukraine still holds partially, and then also will add more pressure on steamrolling further on the front line. Kurakhovo, Pokrovskaya, Velika Novoselka. Today there was a message that our speaker of the Speaker of Command for the southern part of the front, he was saying that he's expecting Russian troops to activate in the south and Zaporozhye, which is understandable. If they're progressing in the east, the south will have to support them, and they likely will start cutting and straining our abilities in the south as well, because they are planning to get to the road that supports the Eastern Front. So Putin will be doing everything to continue his advancement as far as he can until the ceasefire. And of course, he'll try to buy time until Trump's inauguration. But it depends upon the argument that Trump can make, because, of course, if we talk about post-war organization and roles of Russia and United States in the world 10 years from now, that thing is much more important than who owns a certain coal mine in the east of Ukraine. So even with that looming on them, Putin may still go for strategic aviation attacks. We haven't had those attacks for 70 days already, but yeah, they will likely escalate. And there may be other operations that we may go for to try to catch on this opportunity until the ceasefire. But being Putin, yeah, you can expect that he will try to bite as much as he can. However, if he is given serious guarantees, he may stop, he may seize his advancement on the ground for bigger bonuses later. Because, of course, the questions are incomparable. Maybe if you look at, on one hand, at another 2,000 square kilometers, and on the other, post-war setup between Russia and the United States and China, then all these 4 kilometers or even 4 districts may be a smaller scale question in comparison with a bigger task. And from the front, what we hear is that they capture a lot of 30-day Russians there. These are those people who signed the contract, train for 5 days, and get to Ukraine, and then get captured. And these are not the Russian troops that were attacking Ukraine at the beginning of this year. They may be having reserves somewhere, but they're hiding them, but they're definitely running out of steam. So what works for us is that, indeed, if you look at the Donetsk and Lugansk and Zaporozhye and Kherson districts, we're not taking the right side, then Russia would need to do mobilization. That's a key question for them right now, whether they'll go for it. Because if they do, then we will definitely suffer on the front, because huge masses of infantry on the front we will not be able to stop. If they don't conduct mobilization, then these troops that they have now will be gradually slowing down their run. Because average Russian brigade today, if you look at their armored equipment, they're more equal to a battalion, mechanized battalion, instead of 3 or 4 of those. And in infantry, those are 30-day-old trainees, so the quality of their troops is pretty low. And mobilization question will be a key matter that will define the character of this war, or whatever is remaining of it. And If they go for it, they will mobilize them and will train them. Probably they'll dump the first half to the front immediately and then train the other half. They will be likely ready right by Trump's inauguration. So where do you put them after? If you know in advance that there will be peace accord or a ceasefire, where do you put them? There may be an argument for trade, but it's a lot of social pressure internal for Russia that Putin is averse to. And if you don't mobilize now, then you already understand that Putin theoretically already agreed and actually practically pretty much is in agreement with a big ceasefire and big peace deal and absence of escalation or next phase of this war. So we are on the vector to peace, and whether it will be at the 20th of February or 7th of March, these are all just nuances. Because what I'm not seeing in Russia now is any activity to mobilize more. They're trying to solve tasks that they have with the means that they have left. That means that strategic decision to stop this war is already made by Putin. And it is not just his statement. Many people don't believe his statements here, but I am usually suggesting to actually believe their politician's statement, because in my experience, in 90%, 90+% of statements, they're actually telling the truth. And in Valdai Forum recently, he made a statement 3 times that, yes, the war needs to be stopped. And if you don't trust his words, look at the actions. There is no mobilization. There is no even preparation for mobilization, for mass mobilization. So, draft. Without that, they cannot change the outline on the front much. And if you'll see mobilization, then you'll see that they have disagreement with Trump's suggestions, but then Trump will also react differently. But for now, we do not see that. There is just a usual mobilization going on since middle of March of 22. It has never ceased. And every month, they're getting 35,000 troops to the drafting points to bring to the front. This is just to compensate for their current losses. Remember, there were talks that Sirsky was saying by the end of this year, Russia will have about 600,000 on the of the troops on the front. Today, it is about 590, including those that hold the borders. In Ukraine, we have about 540, 150 fewer than Sirsky promised by the end of the year, and we are at the end of the year. That's why you do not see mobilization effort in Russia, and this is one of the main signs that they don't want to continue this war. This is unpopular. And taking unpopular measures is also they're trying to not. So it means that if we do not see that, that means that we should probably put more emphasis on more beneficial trade agreement for the terms of ceasefire and terms of ending this war. And you have 2 important milestones to look at. When Russia will completely run out of resource to continue taking townships. And second, you maybe can bluff for a month or 2 after that. You can still threaten with mobilization, but this is not a constructive discussion and likely will not fly with Trump. He has a very established intel machine that will tell him the current situation on the front, and he will not just bite whatever Putin is promising there. The other option that Putin has is to basically tell him, hey, look, we are running out of steam by 15th of February. After that, we either need to mobilize or to pacify this situation. Whatever I have, I'll run to February, so let's now come to agreement so I don't need to do mobilization and we both win by ending this war. That's roughly what I think is happening between Putin and Trump right now. And for us, it is very important to understand that the key is not words, right? Do not trust the words, look at the deeds. And keep an eye on whether Russia is starting a new wave of mobilization or they do not. This is the key element. And to add to these signals, we also have today's publication from Bild, from Julian Rybke, recently who was criticized in Ukraine, 7 Ways to Sunday. Today he said that Russia's advancement in Kursk district turned out to be a catastrophe for them. Over the first 3 days of attack, Russia suffered significant losses. They aggregated big forces to take Kursk district back, but it turns out to be a catastrophic operation for them. And according to his post, in the first 3 days, they've lost 28 pieces of armored vehicles and over 200 soldiers dead and wounded. I don't know how much these numbers are symbolic of catastrophe, because Russia was promising to aggregate about 50,000 for counteroffensive in Kursk. What can we add to that picture? Nikolai, nothing changes here. Russians have not learned how to fight really on the tactical level. On the operative, they have very good ideations. They're cutting us near Sunja, and they're attacking us on both east and west, so they're trying to encircle us. But when we see the execution in place, these attacks by the March columns in rows running into our landmines with people sitting on their armor, not even taking cover, what can you say about these people? I love the hordes of Russian bots in the media who are promising that they already took everything, but no, they're not effective. It depends upon the reserves, how much of them do they actually draw into this fight and who can do what. My prognostication is unfavorable for Kursk districts. I think Russians will push us out of it, not because they're good fighters, but because the proportion of troops fighting on both sides is very inadequate. And that's given that as we hear from some reports in Ukraine, everything that they can, they're sending to Kursk to hold it. So they're sending refitting, cadre and reserves, everything there, and additional ammo and more equipment. But we're doing some of the most unfavorable type of action right now in Kursk. We're standing in defense and Russians choose where to attack us from. Well, okay, so we picked this strategy, but yeah, that's what it is. And if we look at the other parts of the front, Alexey, we know what is happening in Donetsk. What's your prognostication? Till the 20th of January, do you think Russia, with the forces they have, can they reach the administrative border of Donetsk district, except for Slavyansk and Kramatorsk agglomeration? No, Nikolai, this is impossible. With the current forces they have, they cannot take significant townships like Konstantinovka, and much less even get to the vicinity of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. What about Pokrovsk? Pokrovsk, I think they can take. That one may fall. On the Pokrovsk front, we have systemic loss of management, which we are failing to compensate in one way or another. But as we're talking about the whole district and reaching Konstantinovka, Drushkovka, Slavyansk, and Kramatorsk, they will fail to take it quickly. They cannot even take Donetsk, having full overwhelming advantage there. By the way, in Donetsk and Chasiv Yar, situation has slowed down. There are some town fights happening, but they're not advancing. So now they're pushing towards Kupiansk, that's where the activity is, and they're trying to hold Zaporozhye. That's why I'm saying they're investing where they discover some successes, creating systemic pressure on Konstantinovka direction through Chasiv Yar and some others. But fighting in town, even a smaller town, this is a difficult proposition for ill-trained troops. This is a very difficult task for them to solve. So they'll be slowed down. If they had somewhere tucked away 100,000 well-trained soldiers, that would be a different conversation, but I'm not seeing them. All right, Alexey, and with this on Kurakhovo, we see they're right next to it, right? Yeah, you know, I like the formulation I saw in the news today. The dam was exploded, was blown up, and the water is sinking the nearby villages. I like these formulations. Who blew up this dam? Was it the treacherous enemy? Who blew up the dam? Who is that scumbag? Who is drowning the villagers? Because that reminds me of another unexplainable statement, like the oil prices are going higher when there is no subject behind it. In English language, you very often have a subject that is doing it, right? There are certain industries rising prices or manufacturers are rising prices. In post-Soviet culture, we have a lot of these phrases when we do not have the subject in a statement, you know, when the tragedy came and it destroyed everything, right? Who is the tragedy? What is happening, right? Or the Congress made a certain decision. The Congress is always consisting of people and leaders. Who are those people who are pushing for this law? Or historic process led to a certain outcome. Okay, what is that historic process? Who's behind it? If you remember the statement by Stalin that was made popular fairly recently, the act always has an author. it always has a last name. So any historical process has a specific last name behind it. And until we start bringing these names up to light and start punishing them for the tragedies and not just breeding corruption in the government, we won't have anything effective. So yeah, this formulation, the dam was blown up. Yeah, I don't know who blew it up. Martians came over, or the dam exploded, self-combusted. It was made of some inappropriate materials and it was standing there for years and then it just decided to self-combust. So maybe, maybe we should give an award for that, because when our special forces near Kiev, when they blew up a dam, they actually slowed down Russian advancement in a very important direction. Otherwise, they would have encircled us on a certain strategic point, and that's what they were rewarded for. And of course, some villages suffered, but it was tactically a very important action. So today we're just saying it was blown up. So somebody on the military made a brave decision to do it, and they're just shy and don't know whether they will be reprimanded or rewarded for this. Well, that only tells us that our military are somewhat in fear, right? These military cannot fight well. You need to be able to stand for your decisions. End of the first hour.